Hello, and welcome to my guide on tactics for Deathbringer Saurfang from Icecrown Citadel in 10-man. I'm Bloodrunner from Twisting Nether, and I'll be your tour guide this evening. When my group was doing Icecrown Citadel, the airship actually bugged after the airship battle and got stuck in the air. If this happens to your group, you have to jump down, killing yourself, unless you're a class that can ice block, bubble, or a similar mechanic, then use the Scourge transporter to go up to the last boss. But anyway, this is how we set up our group. We had 2 tanks, 2 healers, 2 melee DPS, and 4 ranged DPS. As you can see, we kept our ranged and healers in a semicircle around the boss tanking spot. We initially tried to kill him with 3 healers, but the healing became too intensive later in the fight, and we realised that a shorter battle with less healers is better than a longer fight with extra healers. The start of this boss has a large cutscene, which is definitely some additional motivation not to wipe. But regardless of the length of the cutscene, don't speak to Overlord Saurfang, or Moradin Bronzebeard if you're Alliance, before your raid is ready, else you might be labelled an arsehole, which is never good. It is imperative that neither the tanks nor the melee DPS do any kind of AoE during this fight. The reason for this is that 15 seconds into the fight, and every 30 seconds thereafter, Saurfang will summon 2 blood beasts. Every melee strike that these blood beasts do gives Saurfang an additional stack of blood power. I will go into blood power in more detail later on, but suffice it to say, you do not want the adds landing any melee swings. To this end, your ranged DPS must nuke them before they reach them, and use any kind of slowing mechanic available to them, such as Earthbind, Slow, Frost Trap, Frost Nova and Chains of Ice. The adds will also have a buff that reduces all damage taken from AoE attacks by 95% and diseases by 70%. The adds will also cause a debuff to any players within 20 yards of them when they spawn, which reduces the movement speed of players affected by 80%, but it also increases their damage by 300%, so ensure that you have your melee and tanks take full advantage of the damage bonus. Now onto Deathbringer Saurfang himself. Saurfang requires 2 tanks, as he will cast a debuff on the active tank that causes his melee strikes against that player to heal him for 5 times the amount dealt. So for example, if he hits a tank with the debuff for 7,000 damage, he will be healed for 35,000. In light of this, the tanks must taunt the moment they see the other tank get this debuff. He will also cast Blood Nova on random raid members throughout the fight, which will hurt all players within a 10-yard radius of that player for 7,500 to 8,500 damage, but not the player that was originally targeted by Saurfang. Each person hit by Blood Nova is an additional stack of blood power that Saurfang will gain. Saurfang will also cast Boiling Blood on random raid members, which ticks for around 5,000 damage every 3 seconds for 15 seconds. Each tick of this gives Saurfang another stack of blood power. He also has a permanent buff on himself, which allows him to gain a stack of blood power every time he does damage with a special ability or summoned creatures. Now to explain what blood power does. Blood power is a stacking buff, and although everyone calls it this, it is technically Saurfang's equivalent of runic power that is increasing. For every stack he has on him, he grows 1% larger and deals 1% more damage. This stacks to 100, at which point he will discharge all of his blood power and cast Mark of the Fallen Champion on a random raid member. This debuff will cause the target to take approximately 4,500 damage every time Saurfang lands a successful melee strike. It cannot be dispelled and persists through death until either Saurfang dies or the raid wipes and combat is reset. When I did Saurfang on my ult, I found that when my group came up for a second attempt, people still had the debuff. Should this happen to your group, have the affected players run out of the instance when alive and run back in again. This should reset it. If a player should die with this debuff on, it will heal Saurfang for 5%, so it's best not to combat res any player who has died with this debuff. Each tick of damage from this ability will give Saurfang an additional blood power stack. The last ability that Saurfang has is Frenzy. When his health reaches 25%, his attack speed will increase by 30% for the rest of the fight, and as his blood power will increase faster, as he can land more melee strikes faster, you will want to save Bloodlust or Heroism for this point. Unlike one attempt we did, where the Shaman used it during the cutscene before the fight. The fight doesn't have an enrage timer on normal 10-man, but bear in mind that too many Marks of the Fallen Champion will become impossible to heal, so they act as a healer-dependent timer. Once you defeat Saurfang, your well-earned loot will be in a chest, just around the corner.